Everything that's old is new again, and we've seen studios take chances on new IPs lately with middling success. And the thing about bringing back a dormant IP is that it already has a built-in fan base of varying sizes, but nonetheless, there is less marketing and risk in bringing back an older IP. In our 3-part series, we're going to look at PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo, and then list off the 5 dormant exclusives that we think need to make a comeback. So here are the top 5 Xbox exclusives that need to come back. First, there should be some guidelines for what should make the list, and there are 5 major points. 1, it needs to be a minimum of 10 years since the last entry. 2, nothing official about development of a new title. 3, this is our list, which means some popular games might be left off the list. Your list will be different. 4, no mobile titles included, and 5, it needs to fit into the portfolio or else there's no reason that it would come back. A reboot of Fusion Frenzy and Xbox Game Pass seem like a match made in heaven. Party games are always hard to persuade casual buyers to take a chance on, but if you remove the barrier to entry, a lot more people are going to be able to try it, and this would also increase the user base. Finally, the industry has proven that there is a market for this type of game. Fall Guys, which is essentially Fusion Frenzy on a much larger scale, has seen massive success to the tune of over 50 million users. The other obvious comparable, Mario Party, is still a proven success for Nintendo to this day. Super Mario Party has currently sold over 18 million copies, and Mario Party Superstars has already sold over 5 million copies, with both titles being full price. Rebooting Fusion Frenzy definitely gives Xbox a foot in the door of the party genre. Shadow Complex is easily on the shortlist for best Xbox Live Arcade title with games like Limbo and Braid. Shadow Complex was released on Xbox 360 in 2009 and remained exclusive to the console until 2016 when the remastered version came to the PlayStation and PC. Shadow Complex was made by Chair, who were acquired by Epic Games right before the release of the game. After Shadow Complex, the team at Chair moved on to Infinity Blade on iOS, which was released in 2010, and then they followed up with 2 more sequels, with the first released in 2011, the second sequel released in 2013. It makes sense why Chair stuck with Infinity Blade over Shadow Complex, as the studio announced that in 2012, Infinity Blade series had made over $23 million in revenue. Combine the success of Infinity Blade, the founder of Chair getting promoted to Worldwide Creative Director of Epic in 2016, and Fortnite Battle Royale releasing in 2017, and it seems pretty easy to figure out why we haven't seen a sequel yet, and we might not for a while. The Glass Half Full, though, says that in the past decade since the release of Shadow Complex, we have seen the popularity of Metroidvanias go way up, meaning that there is a bigger potential market for a sequel. Digital downloads are also much more commonplace than they were back then. Then finally, Epic could give the sequel a head start if they put the main character into Fortnite, which would give the title a lot more awareness. Obviously, Ninja Gaiden has a long and decorated history. What started out as a side-scrolling action game on the NES in the late 80s evolved into something very different with the reboot of Ninja Gaiden by Team Ninja. The 2004 title and the sequel in 2008 were exclusive to the Xbox, and even though the first game eventually came to the other systems years later, and subsequent games and spin-offs released on multiple systems, the series' modern roots are much more closely tied to the Xbox. The rise in popularity with From Software titles over the past decade is nothing shy of astronomical. What was once considered niche and cult is now in the conversation for best game of the year critically and commercially. Team Ninja already has games like Nioh and Wo Long that have strong similarities to From Software games, but these games are available everywhere. Ninja Gaiden would have to return in an original way. If Microsoft was able to get another exclusive agreement for Ninja Gaiden, it would be smart because the IP has very strong brand recognition. The last entry was in 2012, and there are ways to make it work. The less risky option would be stripping it back to the basics with a more stealth-based, hardcore Souls-like that would be similar to Sekiro. The riskier version in my mind would be to go back to the roots of the series and make it a hardcore 2D Ninja Gaiden with hard platforming, Souls-like bosses, and strong stealth elements, and in my head, I'm thinking of something like Mark of the Ninja and Sekiro combined. Although it would be riskier, it would cost a lot less to develop. When I think of Crimson Skies coming back, I can't help but think that it could be an aerial version of Sea of Thieves, The good news is that even though Crimson Skies started out as a tabletop game and the company that developed the first game closed down in 2007, Microsoft still owns the rights to the IP. The other encouraging sign is that in 2013, Microsoft also renewed the trademark for Crimson Skies. Combine this with the amazing technology that Microsoft has within Microsoft Flight Simulator, and it would seem like the game is already halfway out the door. Flight Simulator also received the Top Gun Maverick DLC that gives you a taste of what Crimson Skies could be like if it returned. The Top Gun Maverick DLC didn't have any weapons or combat, which makes sense, as from a PR standpoint, I think you want to keep that out of Flight Simulator. In terms of competition, there are minimal aerial-based games on a premium level, with the two frontrunners being the obvious Flight Simulator and the other being Ace Combat. Ace Combat 7 proves that there is still a market for this type of game, as the 7th entry in the series has managed to sell over 4 million copies. If there is one area where Xbox is lacking compared to PlayStation, it's in high-quality exclusives, and even more specifically, single-player, story-driven, cinematic exclusives. The list is almost endless, with games on the PlayStation with Uncharted, The Last of Us, God of War, Ghost of Tsushima, Spider-Man, Horizon, and Bloodborne just off the top of my head. Rise, Son of Rome checks every single one of those boxes and could be something special. I know what you're saying, Rise wasn't that good. Overall, it was lacking in some departments for sure, but it created a very strong foundation to build upon. What I think was the major downfall for Rise was that it began development as a Kinect exclusive title, and after seeing the success of that platform, it had to pivot to being a standard game. And if a sequel to Rise was created today, it would be able to purely focus on the areas that needed improvement. The story, visuals, and cinematic feel of the game were amazing. It just needed to build a strong enough mechanic around it, incorporate some skill trees, include some Souls-like combat, and you have a system seller. Even at one point, despite being labeled a commercial failure by Crytek, both them and Microsoft were on board for a sequel, with the major dispute coming down to who would retain the IP. So the good news is that both companies want the series to move forward. It will just come down to sorting out the business side of it. Crytek is a fairly large company with around 300 employees, but they are currently still supporting Hunt Showdown, as well as working on a 4th entry in the Crysis series. Those are the 5 Xbox exclusives that we think need to make a comeback. Let me know in the comments below what you think needs to be on this list.